Alan, welcome to the podcast.
I'm glad to be here.
It
Looking
is really,
forward to it.
yeah, same. It's really exciting. We're actually now starting our season three, and the focus is to adapt marketing mindset within the employee experience. And Alan, when we jumped on, you're like, Adam, I've been on this journey for quite some time. Welcome aboard. I want to jump straight into that, Alan. When did this journey begin? How many years ago? Because according to my records, and I've spoken to a few hundred folks, you must be one of the original OGs, as my kids say. Adam, you're an OG. Alan, how many years? When did you begin this journey?
I actually started my career right after I graduated grad school, which was in 1975. So my wife and I were just talking the other day. It's almost been 45 years, believe it or not, that I got on this journey. Initially, it was all about external brand. I got my degree, graduate degree in advertising and communications. And I spent the first 17 years of my life in the advertising world, um, first at McCann Erickson, working on the General Motors business and GMC Truck and Coach and Buick. And then I got recruited away to go to Young and Rubicam, where I had a meteoric career. Very blessed and grateful for that. I was working on the Ford Motor Company business corporately, as well as Lincoln Mercury, in research and planning and what have you. And then in the latter part of that career, I received responsibilities for new business development at a corporate level, as well as merchandising and direct response marketing, working with Wunderman and Cato Johnson. And I was able literally able to see the world with Young and Rubicam, from Germany to Japan to Korea, Latin America, Brazil, as I was helping them win the Ford Motor business on a global basis. So it was a very rewarding experience, I have to
Cool.
admit. I still think of myself as an ad guy, in every way, but it has evolved from the topic that we're going to be talking about today, from not only the external marketing and advertising component, but the inside component as well. And that's where my focus has been over the last 26 or so years.
And there it is. 26 or so years that you focused on the internal audiences from external audiences. And I find it's extraordinary thing happens when someone has create a career or had really deep experiences focused on external audiences and they turn to internal audiences, something magical happens. They're just blown away by the ability to create change. And Ellen, just if you were to zoom out of your career externally compared to your career focused on internally, what would be maybe some of the biggest takeaways before we jump into it? Because I want to capture the audience. I know most jump off, 4 or 5 minutes and then they come back to the episode. I want them to hear from someone who's seen both sides. What are the biggest
Well,
lessons?
the biggest lesson for me uh, really took place in the late 80s, early 90s, with the advent of process redesign, re-engineering, just-in-time management. And that was like throwing a wrench into the internal workings of organizations, so that they were falling apart. I mean, productivity and inactivity at the corporate site was just not working effectively. And there was a gentleman by the name of Michael Hammer. He was a guru of re-engineering. He wrote a book in the late 80s called Re-engineering the Corporation. Um, uh, Coincident, and I was at Accenture and Arthur D. Little during that time. And what we had observed, and all the major consulting firms were going down the path of doing re-engineering and TQM and all that kind of programming, and half of those projects by and large were failing. And through a conversation, Michael Hammer was a personal friend of mine. Our kids went to school together here in Boston, and he shared with me that 50% of the change management initiatives that he was aware of and working on were failing. And he attributed that 80% of those 50% failures were attributed to people dimension and communication failures that were taking place inside the organization. And he said to me, Steinmetz, you know marketing, you know advertising, you're an ad guy, right? Um, can't you figure it out that so that these change management programs would be more successful? And so I sat down with a colleague of mine at Arthur D. Little, and we came up with an 8 phase, a 4 step process to engage internal constituencies to support change. And that we coined it, is called it inward marketing, because we knew, everybody knew what external marketing was, right? But nobody really understood what inward marketing was all about. And so we adopted many of the same advertising phases and processes, but I but modified it for an internal audience. And when we did that, transformation was more, had a better sticky value, and people were getting it. And another phenomenon is we were able to, just like you do an external segmentation of your audiences, and you want to appeal to the message to the right person at the right time, we were able to identify the right internal audiences as well, the people that were in support of change, people who are not sure about the change, people who were enthusiastic about the change, and the people who didn't care at all. And when you were able to segment those populations, you could invest your time and energy against the right people at the right time with the right message.
At this point, the audience is probably like, "Ah, Adam, this is why you brought Ellen on." Absolutely, yes, you can see it. And Ellen said he started the journey to figure it out, and he has figured it out. He's worked with a number of Fortune 100 brands. We're talking about really big brands: Walmart, American Express, HP, McDonald's, American Airlines. I can go on and on and on. And Alan and I were just chatting, like, what would be the focus of our episode? Because we can go to so many places, and there's so many places where, Alan, you can add value to the audience. But there's a specific area we haven't done enough work in, which is, when you launch a new brand, often called a refresh, although I think that's a terrible word, but it's just the word people use. Often a refresh is actually a big deal. It's not like it implies a little, touch up, but it is much more extensive in most cases when new sites, new messaging, new really identity is created. But I said, Ellen, what do you think about uh, what do we do internally when we do a brand, repositioning, rebrand, remessaging? And many organizations really fail in this, like big time fail. Often employees in those organizations see the new values or the new beliefs for the first time during a Super Bowl commercial or an ad they see online or a billboard, and they go, yeah, that's not for us, it's for our customers, which is a complete disconnect. So the area we're going to focus on with Alan is how to align internally with external audiences during a brand refresh. And Ellen, you mentioned an 8 step process that you've created. So I'd love for us to just walk through, at what point do you begin these motions? Do you begin when you're about to launch a new brand refresh and you begin communicating externally? Do you
Wow.
communicate much earlier when you're just conceptualizing it? When do we start? Walk us through this,
Well,
please.
that's Adam. That's a great question. You know, in 10 years ago, I would have started with what's your external brand message and how do you align it to your inside audience, and so that they understand what it is you want to say to the outside world. Uh, in the last 10 years or so, though, that has totally changed.
Mm.
And it's all around a strategic imperative around your purpose, your vision, and your mission and values. And companies, um, in order for you to be transformative and to meet the needs of your customers, you also need to meet the needs of your employees as well as your shareholders. And that surrounds itself, that creates a new circumference around purpose. What is your purpose?
Mm-hmm.
And why are you in business?
Mm-hmm.
And you have to go through the effort of articulating that and then expressing it through your mission and your vision and your values.
Mm-hmm.
And and you then transform that in terms of the delivery, the behaviors, the products, the distribution, the manufacturing, your attitudes and your opinions regarding climates or social values. And if they're not aligned around your purpose, you will alienate one of those three stakeholders, whether it be your employees, your customers, your shareholders, or your vendors. We call it tri-engagement. You want to align all three of those constituencies to support your purpose and your mission.
And Ellen,
Um,
let's just quickly go there, just for a single click, not a double click. And when we talk about purpose, right, we're not talking about making money, although that's we understand that's part of organization's existence. And you and I spoke briefly about this. I have interviewed Simon Sinek years ago. He was part of the inspiration of the journey. But
correct.
Ellen, when you think about purpose, that's a bullseye purpose for the organization. What characteristics would you think it should have?
It's why you exist. It really is going back to Senec's concepts of the why. Why is it that we're in business, and what fundamental customer and employee expectation do we hope to achieve, which will allow us to fulfill our obligations to some degree on Earth, but for our customers. And if we do that successfully, the byproduct of which is we will be more productive and make more money, which is a benefit that goes to the shareholders. So for me, it's not about climate change or social welfare. It's about a fundamental difference that sets you apart from the competition.
Mm-hmm.
When I was early in my career, my boss at Young and Rubicam used to say, "What are the things that you can do that nobody else can do to set you apart and still has a greater, higher value for society as a whole?" And I really have adapted that. His name was Bill Power. I have lost touch with him. I hope he's still well and healthy and happy. But it's all about that. For Dove and Unilever, it's about inner beauty. It's not about soap. It's not about keeping a cleaner face or having softer skin. It's about inner beauty. And if Unilever is going to help Dove do a better job at people feel good about themselves as a result of accentuating their inner beauty, like, wow, that's an unbelievable idea. And if you're able to get your internal people to focus on coming up with the best ingredients and the best formulations of chemicals so that people could feel clean and experience that inner beauty and be able to serve that to the customers through the shopping experience, that's when you have the harmony and the alignment of an internal and external message. That's around a common purpose. You
Oh,
get it?
with you. Perfect. Thank you, Alan. And taking us back to, a refresh. If the refresh is to revisit the purpose of the organization, then would you suggest for the organization to ask its employees? Do you suggest the organization to engage them in maybe a two-way communication? Or do you suggest for them to say, hey, what do you think about our purpose? Or do you announce it internally first? What would be that kind of first step in the process?
It's really quite elementary. You have to have a 360 stakeholder assessment of your strategic options going forward, and your employees, as well as I would say your future employees, your recruits, have to be part of that as well. As well as your customers. In the olden days, you'd only do your market research with the customer. At Young and Rubicam, I was the head of research, and we would only talk to customers. We never would talk to about employees. As a matter of fact, one of the major this is going to go way back. I don't know how young your audience is, but um, uh, one of the major problems was that I worked on in my career was the quality is job one campaign at the Ford Motor Company, and they had a major problem where the Ford acronym was fix or repair daily. The quality was so bad that people were, and we found out that the reason it was so bad is because their own employees didn't care enough about their products, that they didn't do the extra effort to make sure that it was the wrench and the nut was tight enough, or in some cases, because of union negotiations, would even sabotage the products. There was an old story about a guy, I think it was a Cadillac actually, who put in an empty bottle with a note in the door panel, and the customer bought the car, and for the life of him, he could not figure out why there was this rumbling in this door. They finally, after 6 months, he dropped the car off and says, "I don't want this car anymore." They took the car apart and they found this note in a bottle from an employee saying, he says, "Until you give me an extra $5 an hour, this is what's going to happen to your
Oh
cars,"
my God.
uh, so, so it wasn't until the Ford Motor Company created a quality is job one campaign. If you may recall, it had a very great slogan and musical sting. And we created a 360 assessment. We got the employees involved, we got the unions involved, we got the customers involved. And what were we going to do together to improve the quality of Ford Motor Company and over the course and make it job one. Job one is the highest priority that a company can do. And they work together to improve that performance. And literally in 19 months, they were able to reverse the poor quality ratings of the Ford Motor Company, and were able to eventually win the Baldrige Award, which is the United States measure of best quality built OSHA products in the world. And so it can be done. It has been done. The same thing happened to some degree with the imports in the early 70s. Also, it wasn't until they didn't care. Whereas in contrast today, you have a campaign from Subaru. I don't know if you're familiar with this, that there's a great case history on our website about Subaru, which is not a client of ours, but I so admire what they have done. Their brand purpose is love. Imagine that, an automotive company that focuses on love. And what they're basically saying, that if you love your customer and your employee, you love the product, that could be a common purpose to ensure high quality, safety, access, fun, drivability, and so on and so forth. And the way that they represent that is by using puppies, adorable, lovable puppies. And they do it day in and day out, and they've really instituted love in all of their procurement, supply chain, and manufacturing processes. It's fascinating to do a good in-depth analysis of how something as simple as love or inner beauty
Hmm.
or something like that could be used to motivate and inspire. Another one is that I use a lot, which is a client was a client of ours for many years, was Walmart. And Walmart has had the same Sam Walton tagline, "Save money, live better," from its inception in the '60s. But they couldn't very effectively translate that to their internal constituencies. And what does that mean? If you would walk into a typical Walmart store and say, "Hey, as a Walmart worker, tell me what "save money, lives better" means, and why should I care?" They couldn't do that. Uh, it wasn't until through our effort we were able to translate that external brand message into an internal demonstration of behavioral change, that really things in many ways really took off in terms of their ability to surpass their competitors like Kohl's and Target. And that was what we did for them is, well, what does that mean in terms of a behavioral change for every single employee? And we came up with a concept called EDLP, everyday low prices. If they do everything in their job on a daily basis to lower the cost of uh, prices for customers, ultimately that will allow customers to save money and live better. And if they're able to do that, it becomes a virtual circle where the employees and associates, is what they call them, will live better as well. And that has translated into better educational opportunities, better salaries, promotions, and so on and so forth, so they can take care of their own employees. So we used to say EDLP translates into SMLB, Save Money, Live Better. And it was a very, very successful long-term campaign, and it's still pretty much in existence today.
Fascinating. And Alan, and I saw you commented in our innovators community. Interesting question would be, as organizations are going through this, do they need a independent perspective, a third party to come in to support it? Or do you see them being able to do this themselves, the step we're discussing now, to get the internal constituents to be engaged in the process? Especially what I find in larger organizations, there probably fatigue around initiatives. There's maybe in many cases, do they listen? Do they actually listen to what we have to say? But what's your take? Can an organization do it themselves, or should they bring someone from outside the organization to support the process?
Well, um, I think it depends on the corporation and the hybrid. It all starts with having an internal champion who recognizes, and that could be a CEO or it could be a head of marketing or a head of HR, someone, someone, someone inside the organization who realizes that the associate and the employee play an equal voice, an equal component of their marketing mix. And not just treat them as an ancillary consequence of operating a business. So that's really number one. Number two, when they come to recognize that, they have to be able to allocate monetary resources the same way that they would for an external advertising campaign. If you're going to spend $100 million on an external advertising campaign, and you have a large internal employee operation as well, why not spend as at least 50 to 1 on the internal constituencies, and make sure that there is a common voice, a common message that is conveyed on an ongoing day in, day out basis with reinforcements of that message over time. So that's the second component of it. And then the third one is yes, you do have to devote uh, time, money, and budget and programming to ensure that the internal and external messaging is done at the right in the right way. And in order for that to happen, my experience, frankly, and it's a little self-serving, I'll admit that, is to hire an outside independent advertising agency, or what we would call is an internal communication change management company, who can help you with an integrated communications platform. And that starts with coming up with a message that is compelling around the common vision, mission, and purpose. That's the first phase. The next one, and once you have that, you have to translate into a creative metaphor. How do you express that in a creative way so that people can use their imagination and internalize that message in a way that they can relate to? Um, uh, and I'll come back to that in a minute as
Hmm.
well. And then once you have that message and creative metaphor, you have to develop it into an internal advertising or awareness building program that is usually done through some form of experiential communications, whether it be an all hands meeting, a webinar from the CEO to a broad audience, and then have it cascaded all the way down to the individual store level in the case of retail or operation or manufacturing plant. The second phase is really educating them, a training program of some kind. And we are at the forefront of what we call gamification, where we use methods, communications, both digitally and in person training programs through gamification, where we find that people retain the information longer and better, and they're more entertained by learning. The third phase is what we call social programming. How do you create a peer-to-peer communications loop where it's not reinforced by leadership going down all the time, but by your common peers. If one of your associates, the guy who's on the bench next to you, tells you, "Hey, we don't do that way anymore because of this new brand," or "This is
Mm,
what we believe in," it's going to have much greater influence and impact on the behavioral change. And then the fourth phase is what we call recognition and reward. If people are doing what you've asked them to do, they're changing their behavior, they're become brand advocates, they're telling their friends, they're recruiting their buddies to join the company because of what they believe in, they should be recognized through incentives by attaboys, attagirls,
mm,
making them heroes, and showcasing them, spotting the light on them, so that other people know that these are the behaviors that we recognize in order to achieve the goal. So if you do those four things, generate awareness, have education and gamification, create social media capabilities for peer-to-peer acceptance, and then recognition and rewards, and you develop an integrated communications of those four components, you will have a much more success at an internal rebrand or internal launch that simply has, that will make you stand out. We know that from research that companies who have highly engaged branded associates perform at 140% higher shareholder value
hmm.
and performance than companies that don't. And let me just shut this off. I'm sorry for
No,
that.
it's fine. Yeah.
Um, and um, and that makes a huge difference in terms of overall performance inside an organization.
140% improvement. I mean, we're not talking about
147% according to Gallup.
147%. Ellen, when we talk about kind of the people, which we just kind of, I think about this in broad strokes of an emerging market: people, process, technology. Talked a bit about our people. We talked about the process and the approaches that you just stated. On the technology front, we all, and I'm a co-founder of a technology company. We often scratch our heads thinking about, everyone's busy, really, really busy in the workplace. Getting through the noise is really hard. On the customer side, we see more and more of different innovative ways for how to send short messages and send ads, right? Are more relevant ads, right message, right time. How do you think about that from internal perspective? Do you think we're going to be running ads? And if yes, are we going to be delivering those messages inside where work is getting done? How do you think about the future of technology for this audience?
Also, a very good question, Adam. I'm a very, having come from Accenture and Arthur D. Little, I'm a very strong advocate of technology platforms. In fact, we are in the middle of building an employee experience portal right now for a major client that is entirely using new technologies and VR and augmented reality and intuitive processing, gamification, and using all of these different approaches and putting them together in one experience portal. So yes, there are a variety. I don't know if there's going to be a commercial break within those things, but if who knows? But there in internal advertising or snippets and YouTube videos and what have you are already taking place. As soon as you walk into a major corporation, there usually is a welcoming video of some kind. There is some type of a tutorial, interface that you can find out about the history of the company. So technology is already very much present. I think the technologies, there are some commercial technologies. I'll put a little pitch in for one of my former colleagues who is one of the principals of a company called Hub Engage, and they have created a communications platform to a large extent based on our four-phase programs, where they have an ability to create 360 assessment and communication capabilities to a large constituency audiences. And that could be text messages, it could be videos, it could be emergency broadcasts, especially around COVID. It was very, very relevant. But they're, just SMS messaging platforms are playing, Slack are playing a huge impact on how people communicate uh, the core purpose. It's not just tactics for tactics sake. It goes back to what's the core purpose and what's the core
Hmm.
message and what's the metaphor. If you don't have those right, then it's just messaging for messaging's sake. And in many ways, in my opinion, it confuses what you're trying to achieve. There has to be a continuity. There has to of message. There has to be a cascading, making sure that the right people say the right things to the right people at the right audience at the right place, and then all that has to be orchestrated. And technology, fortunately, has the ability to facilitate all of that. So I hope I answered your questions.
Well,
I do believe that technology plays a factor
you
across the
definitely
board.
have, and I'd like to just double click in one specific area, and I want to connect the dots to where we began. We talked about a brand refresh, and you said the words, right message, right person, right time, and you just mentioned that again. You talked about a cascading of communication. And then, yes, we talked about technology and where work is getting done in Slack, Microsoft Teams, and larger organizations. The place out, and I want to carefully talk about this, but in order for us to meet the customer where they are, you have to understand where they are. And the only way you do that is by looking at data, customer data. The logic then suggests in order for us to meet the employee where they are, is to look at the employee data. Now, there's a bigger conversation on governance and responsibility. This isn't Big Brother. This is used for good to meet people where they are. But have you had some time to think about this, or have you started seeing that? Is employee data one way for us to be able to meet them where they are with the right message at the right time?
Yes. We one of the we have a product called Change Effects, where we measure pre to post uh, audiences based on their segmentation of where they are. People who've been there 20 years versus 5 months, and we are constantly monitoring their attitudes, opinions, um, learning, knowledge, understanding, things of that nature for companies that use that on a regular and ongoing basis. So yes, employee satisfaction, status studies are critical. One thing has changed it used to be appraisal systems and employee feedback programs were done once a year. We're finding many clients have instituted through proprietary software and or syndicated software that they bought, um, the Qualtex and others, where they're monitoring 365 days a year. They're constantly asking for feedback, and there's a running average of that information so that they're able to monitor indexing on a daily basis. What's going up, what's going down, what's the mood, so on and so forth. And I'm a subscriber of that idea. I think that that's beneficial. Um, and if you monitor the information, you're going to be able to get a greater sense of where things were. There's a recent example of this when you know, there's a company here in Boston, an e-commerce company called Wayfair. I don't know if you're
Oh
familiar
yeah,
with them there.
definitely.
And they, it turns out that when there was a refugee problem and they were in the south border, uh, there was a, a need to find bedding and beds for all these refugees who were coming and immigrants that were coming over the border. And the U.S. government bought a huge contract of beds with Wayfair. Of course, Wayfair didn't think much of it. The government needed beds. We have beds. We negotiated a contract and a price, and here are the beds. But the popular opinion amongst their employees was so the anti-government supporting uh, uh, housing of immigrants in prison-like settings that there was a mass walkout here in Boston, and over 2,000 people boycotted going to the office that day to send a message to the company that they were against the government policies of, imprisoning immigrants in caged environments. Who would have known that? I mean, even research wouldn't have known that.
Hmm.
But by better understanding the Generation Z audience, which was by and large who that audience was at that time, they probably would have done some things differently. And in the end, they had to cancel the order. And I don't know what happened at the post story, but it's an example that if your internal and external messaging and strategy are not aligned, it can blow up in your face.
In a big way, Alan. So I understand in terms of employee data, the clear. My last question here would be, as we think about the future of people initiatives, people, process, technology, you've seen a lot of change. It's fascinating that you've been on this for 27, well, the total journey sounds like 40, on the internal 26. And then there was a 10 years ago where you would have started externally first. And now over the last 10 years, it's internal first. What do you think, maybe one more big change that you think is taking place from your perspective, from what you're seeing in the market? What else is happening for our audiences to be mindful of? And also, one piece of advice that you would give to the audience of innovators who are on this journey. Most, of course, haven't been on this for as long as you have, but what advice would you give them?
Well, that's a great question, and I ponder that actually a lot. Um, First and foremost, it's important to be thoughtful and creative. Maybe that goes back to my advertising roots. Um, Mundane communication that doesn't inspire anybody doesn't do an effective job. So I believe that the message that one comes up with has to fundamentally break the barriers uh, of of mediocrity.
Hmm.
Okay, you have to you have to stimulate, titillate with words and impressions and visuals that imagines people to want to say, tell me more about that. I want to learn something about that. That's the first thing. So you have to work very, very hard at getting past the attributes of words to the benefits of the words to the emotional value of what those words mean. If you understand me.
Oh yeah,
I
yeah.
could talk about sushi as wet, dead, cold fish on a patty of rice, which is an attribute, right?
Hmm.
Or I could talk about sushi as a romantic dining experience that is exotic and tintillating in a way that you've never experienced before.
And I just
Now,
got hungry.
if I was going to present one or the other, which would you prefer?
Oh yeah,
I-
I'll clearly see
Okay,
the
so
difference.
so messaging and creativity, without getting corny, of course, not an example I just showed you, is really important. So that's the first thing. The other thing that I think about a lot, especially in the last 6 months, is the impact of artificial intelligence. It is huge, and it is going to get even bigger. And when you couple creativity, as I just illustrated, with innovative artificial intelligence capabilities to write copy and create metaphors and to effectively communicate to your internal and external audiences, um, that is either going to make things more complicated or more easy. I think it's going to end up being more easy. So, and in internal stakeholders and advocates need to embrace that, in my opinion, and start using it in more effective integrated communications ways. Again, against our four frameworks: the awareness building, training, social media, as well as recognition and rewards. And then the third thing that I think about a lot, and I don't know how it's going to come out or flush out just yet, is the role of influencer marketing. Until now, um, influence marketing has by and large been externally driven. You know, what can I say to influence you to buy a product? I think that influencer marketing has not yet come to its fruition internally yet. So how are internal influencers going to drive and make a difference in the purpose, mission, vision, values, is also in terms of what decisions are made broadly and strategically within the organization. And that's where the role of the people, process, and technology could really have an impact is if internal influencer marketing plays a role at corporate performance and governance. That would be very, very interesting.
And I don't know about a few of the innovators listening right now, but my mind went straight into organizational network analysis. That you can now, with the data that you have, especially in the Microsoft ecosystem, you can identify those influencers and what's possible. Oh my goodness, just blows my mind. It almost like episode
There you
two.
go.
Right, exactly, Alan. Well, listen, I just want to say a huge thank you for your time. I know you're busy. I know you have a lot going on in your world. Just appreciate you taking a moment of your time to share your brilliance. And I know you've joined the community. Welcome. So, on behalf of everyone who's listening, thank you.
Thank you very much. I enjoyed this very much, and I appreciate you reaching out to me. And I'd be more than happy to speak with your guests and your other members. And please, if you hear this and you would like to connect, you could reach out to me on LinkedIn as well as on our website at inwardconsulting.com.
Check it out, y'all. Thanks, and over and out.